when a young biker slapped a frail 76-year-old war veteran in a sleepy roadside diner. He thought he'd silenced an old man. What he didn't know was that the veteran's son was minutes away. And he wasn't coming alone. What followed shook the entire town and left everyone questioning the cost of disrespect. Read on, but only if you're ready for a story where justice roars louder than any motorcycle engine. Subscribe now for more gripping tales where karma comes wrapped in combat boots. Asterisk. It was a quiet Tuesday morning when the bell above the door jingled at Patty's Diner. That little faded place off Route 27 where the coffee's cheap, the pies stale, and the regulars don't bother with menus anymore. But something in the air felt off that day, like the calm before a thunderstorm. 76-year-old war veteran Earl Gunny Mathers was seated at his usual booth near the window, dressed in his faded denim jacket decorated with dusty old patches from Vietnam. Sipping black coffee and reading the obituary section out of habit, more than interest, when the front door swung open so hard it rattled the glass and in walked three bikers, all in black leather, covered in tattoos, piercings, the smell of oil and arrogance trailing behind them like smog. When as they clomped in with steel-toe boots and clashing laughter, the diners turned awkwardly silent. Even the jukebox seemed to hum lower, but Earl didn't flinch. He'd stared down tanks, mortar, and death itself more times than he could count, and wasn't about to get jittery over some angry boys playing dress-up. The tallest one, whose vest bore the patch Riper, President, strutted over to the counter and barked at Patty for food, mocking the place with rude jokes. And when Earl quietly looked over at the commotion and shook his head, just a slow, disappointed shake, like only an old Marine could give, it caught the biker's eye and ignited something ugly. He marched over, towering above Earl and sneering, "You got something to say, Grandpa?" To which Earl, without so much as glancing up, muttered, "I bled for your right to act like a punk, but that don't mean I gotta respect it." And before anyone could breathe, the biker's hand whipped across Earl's face with a sickening crack, the sound of skin on bone echoing louder than the gasps that followed, knocking Earl's glasses clean off his face and drawing a trickle of blood from his lip. And for one heavy moment, the entire diner froze. Time suspended between horror and action, but Earl simply picked up his glasses, righted himself, and he said, "You've got 11 minutes to pray, son." And the biker laughed. "Pray? What, you calling the cops?" But Earl, wiping his lip, replied with steel in his voice, "No, I called my boy," and then he placed his phone gently on the table. Screen still lit with an open call, and the biker scoffed. What's he gonna do? Hobble over here in his wheelchair too? But Patty, pale as milk, whispered, "His son's still active. Special forces, I think," and that's when unease crept into the biker's bravado. But he laughed it off, returning to his buddies at the counter, mouthing off about old-timers and their imaginary sons, though his eyes kept darting toward the door, and exactly 11 minutes later, it happened a low rumble at first. Then a dozen matte black Humvees pulled up outside, parking with militant precision, and out stepped over 24 men in camouflage and tactical gear, led by a square-jawed 6'4" operator with eyes as cold as mountain ice. And when he entered the diner, silence fell heavier than before. The biker suddenly very small against the might of real soldiers, and the leader looked at Earl, asked, "You all right, Dad?" To which Earl nodded and said, "He's the one," pointing at the biker who slapped him, and the soldier turned to the biker and said simply, "Outside. Now." But the biker laughed nervously. "What, you gonna jump me with your little army?" And the son replied, "No, just me." And what followed outside wasn't a fight, it was a lesson. The kind taught without words, without mercy, just bone-deep regret and a pain that echoes in dreams. As the soldier dismantled the biker's pride punch by punch, not out of rage but duty, a cold, calculated dismantling that left the man bruised, broken, and blubbering for forgiveness on the gravel as the townsfolk watched from inside. And when it was over, the son pulled him up by the collar and said, "My dad earned his scars, you just collected yours," then tossed him into his own bike, handed him his vest, told him to ride and never return. But that wasn't the twist. The twist came days later, when a video from a diner's old security camera went viral online. Veteran slapped gets justice in 11 minutes. racking up millions of views, news interviews, and even a White House acknowledgement. But while the internet roared for justice, Earl remained humble, declining interviews, telling everyone the real heroes didn't come back, and his son went back to base, saying, "My job isn't over, but the bikers? Their gang dissolved within a month, splintered by fear and shame, while Patty's Diner got a full renovation funded by anonymous donors, now displaying a plaque near the window, 'Respect is served here,' and if you ever pass that way, you might still see Earl in his booth sipping coffee, his son's coin resting beside his cup. And you'll know that sometimes justice doesn't come in courtrooms. It rides in with boots on the ground and love in its heart." For more stories that grip you like a handshake from a war hero, subscribe now, because sometimes legends aren't made on battlefields. They're made in diners. Asterisk.